You are standing in a small wooden chamber above a busy medieval market square. The air smells faintly of ink, wax, and damp parchment. A narrow table stretches before you, covered in folded charters, wax seals, and thin strips of sheepskin scraped, nearly translucent. Beneath this quiet room, thousands of lives unfold. Debts recorded, taxes assessed, land transferred, disputes preserved. None of it official in the modern sense. None of it guaranteed to last. Yet without these fragile records, the town would not function for a single week. Tonight you will follow the scribes, clerks, and town officers who built order from memory and ink. You will see how property was proven, how fines were tracked, how marriages and deaths became permanent, and what happened when parchment rotted, ink faded, or seals were broken. This is the hidden machinery of medieval towns, not the towers or walls, but the ledgers that held it all together. If quiet systems like this help you rest while learning something real, you are welcome to subscribe. Now, settle in, a clerk dips his quill, and the record begins. This medieval town does not depend on paper first. It depends on memory. Information lives in people. Before ink ever touches parchment, facts move through mouths, ears, and repetition. You stand in the center of a crowded market square. A town officer raises his voice above the livestock and bargaining merchants. What he speaks now will determine who owes tax, who owns land, and who is bound by oath. Memory here is not casual. It is structured, reinforced, and distributed across the community like beams in a timber roof. On market days, declarations are not whispered, they are placed deliberately in the open air. Taxes, boundary confirmations, guild rules, and seasonal obligations are spoken where farmers, merchants, laborers, and officials gather. If something must be remembered collectively, it is spoken where the collective stands. Repetition is not accidental. Important information is restated at intervals tied to the calendar. Rents are recalled at planting and harvest. Tax obligations are restated before collection periods. Guild requirements are repeated on feast days. These seasonal anchors act as mnemonic devices. When barley is sown, a memory cue activates. When candles are blessed, membership dues are recalled. Memory attaches itself to recurring physical events. You notice elders and long-standing household heads treated as reference points. They are not archives in a romantic sense. They are stability nodes. Their authority comes from longevity and reputation. When disputes arise about past agreements or obligations, these individuals are consulted because they have witnessed cycles. Their memory is reinforced by participation in repeated events over decades. The town distributes information across age groups so that no single person holds all knowledge. Speech patterns also carry structure. Lists are organized rhythmically. Obligations are grouped in threes or fours for ease of recall. Boundaries are described using fixed sequences of landmarks. The phrasing does not change often. Stability in language supports stability in memory. When wording remains consistent year after year, deviation becomes obvious. Reputation functions as error correction. If someone misstates a tax rate or land boundary, others respond. Memory is communal. A false recollection does not stand unchallenged for long. The social cost of being wrong about important civic facts encourages careful retention. Accuracy becomes part of personal standing. Witness groups create redundancy. A land agreement is observed by multiple households. A debt acknowledgement occurs before several guild members. Memory overlaps intentionally. Each participant carries a partial copy of the event. If one memory fades, others fill the gap. This is distributed storage without parchment. You observe that memory is not relied upon equally for all data. Highly variable information, such as fluctuating market prices, is not expected to remain stable in recollection. Stable structures such as annual dues, boundary lines, or inheritance rights are prioritized. The system selects what must endure and reinforces only those elements through ritual repetition. There are limits. Human recall fades. Illness removes key individuals. Migration shifts population balance. The town compensates by embedding crucial knowledge in repeated communal practices. Annual boundary walks reinforce geography. Seasonal tax recitations reinforce finance. Guild initiation ceremonies reinforce membership roles. Memory becomes embodied in action. You also notice corrective mechanisms. When discrepancies arise, assemblies are convened. Multiple witnesses are consulted. Memory is compared, not assumed. The goal is not speed, but convergence. Overlapping recollections are examined until agreement forms. This process is slow but stable. The town does not consider memory inferior to writing. It treats it as a living layer of infrastructure. Writing supplements it, but memory carries continuity between written entries. When a clerk dies or a ledger is misplaced, communal memory preserves structure long enough for reconstruction. You stand still and observe how information travels. It is spoken at markets. It is restated at church steps. It is reinforced at guild halls. It is attached to seasons, rituals, and property. Memory is not accidental here. It is cultivated, distributed, corrected, and renewed. This town remembers because it builds remembering into its daily structure. Information is not stored in a single location. It lives in cycles, in repetition, in groups, and in reputation. That is the first layer of the system. A transition from living memory to wood is now coming to fruition. In a dim workspace, a length of hardwood lies across a table. It is straight, dry, and chosen for grain clarity. Oak, hazel, or willow may be used depending on availability and durability. The surface is smoothed enough to accept cuts, but left firm enough to prevent accidental splitting. A knife makes measured notches. Each cut corresponds to quantity. The depth and width of each notch carry meaning. Larger notches represent greater units. Smaller marks represent fractions. The spacing is consistent. Standardization matters because both parties must interpret the stick the same way. You observe that tallies are often used for taxation, rents, and long-term debts. A villager owes grain or coin. The obligation is carved into the stick in increments that can be added over time. Each addition is physical. There is no erasing. The wood records accumulation. Once the notches are complete, the stick is split lengthwise. The grain determines the break. The split produces two matching halves. Each half contains the same notches, mirrored by the irregular grain pattern. This is the core of the system. Neither half alone can be altered without detection. When reunited, the two pieces must align perfectly. One half is kept by the creditor. The other remains with the debtor. Storage methods vary. Some halves are kept in chests within manor houses. Others remain in household storage, wrapped in cloth or placed among tools. The location is secondary to the principle. Each party holds a fragment of the same record. When payment is made, the halves are brought together. Alignment verifies authenticity. The grain lines reconnect. If someone attempted to shave down notches or add cuts, the split surface would no longer match. Fraud prevention relies on physical structure rather than ink comparison. You notice that tallies are durable. Wood resists moisture better than parchment in certain conditions. It does not require literacy to interpret if the notch system is standardized locally. Recognition depends on counting and visual familiarity, not script reading. Tally sticks also create incremental accountability. Each new notch requires physical action in the presence of relevant parties. The carving becomes a witnessed event. The system blends memory and material record. People recall when the notch was cut, while the stick preserves the quantity. There are conventions for marking large sums. Sometimes different angles of cuts represent categories such as wheat, barley, coin, or labor days. The stick can contain multiple obligations if spacing is structured clearly. The physical length of the wood limits total capacity, so long-term accounts may require additional sticks. You observe the life cycle of a tally. It begins with an initial obligation. Notches accumulate over seasons. Payments reduce outstanding amounts, sometimes represented by countermarks or by issuing a new tally reflecting the remaining balance. When a debt is fully settled, the halves may be destroyed together or retained as proof of completion. Storage security matters. Creditor halves are often kept with other fiscal records. In some regions, official tallies related to royal taxation are stored in treasuries. In smaller towns, manor lords or stewards maintain them. The physical simplicity of the system does not imply informality. It is structured and recognized in courts. The split design distributes trust. Neither party relies solely on the other's integrity. Verification occurs through reunion of halves. This reduces reliance on memory alone and supplements communal recollection with material evidence. You also observe limitations. Fire destroys wood, insects damage it, loss of one half complicates verification. In such cases, witness testimony may be required to reconstruct the obligation. The tally integrates into broader systems rather than functioning independently. The system persists because it balances accessibility and security. It requires no complex materials. It limits forgery through grain alignment. It distributes record custody. It integrates with oral acknowledgement at the moment of carving. You stand quietly as another notch is cut. The action is small but deliberate. The sound of blade against wood marks an obligation entering material form. The stick does not speak, but it carries memory forward. In a town without centralized paperwork, this piece of split wood becomes a shared ledger. The tally stick is not primitive improvisation. It is a calculated method of record-keeping built around durability, verification, and distributed custody. It anchors financial memory in something tangible and difficult to falsify. It becomes the second layer of how the town remembers. Barrels are awaiting transport, as you observe. Each barrel carries a carved or painted symbol. It is not decorative. It is identification. In a town where literacy is uneven and signatures are rare, visual marks function as stable identifiers tied to individuals, families, and workshops. A merchant mark is designed for clarity and repetition. It often consists of straight lines arranged in a unique configuration. Curves are used sparingly because they are harder to carve consistently. The mark must be simple enough to reproduce quickly, yet distinct enough to prevent confusion with another trader's symbol. You observe how marks appear on goods before they leave a workshop. A cooper brands a barrel head. A cloth merchant inks a symbol onto folded textiles. A metal worker stamps a small device into a finished tool. The placement is consistent. It appears where inspection will occur. On crates it may be on the side panel. On sacks it may be stitched into a tag. Visibility ensures accountability. Guilds frequently maintain informal or formal awareness of member marks. When a craftsman joins a guild, his mark is noted among other members to prevent duplication. In some towns, the mark is recorded in writing. In others, it is simply recognized by peers through repeated exposure. The system relies on familiarity reinforced by trade interaction. Marks extend beyond goods. You see them carved into beams of timber houses, etched into stone at construction sites, and pressed into wax seals attached to contracts. A mark ties an individual to labor, ownership, and obligation. It becomes a portable signature in environments where few can sign their names. Recognition is communal. Market inspectors learn to associate specific marks with quality standards. If inferior goods appear bearing a respected symbol, suspicion follows. Reputation attaches to the mark. Because it is visible and repeatable, the symbol becomes an economic shorthand for reliability. You observe the inheritance of marks. Sons often adopt modified versions of a father's design. A small line is added or a stroke altered. Continuity allows customers to recognize lineage while distinguishing individuals. This gradual evolution prevents confusion while maintaining brand stability across generations. Marks also travel across regions. A merchant trading beyond his town uses the same symbol to signal origin and accountability. In ports and trade fairs, recognition of familiar marks reduces uncertainty. Even if language differs, the symbol remains consistent. Fraud remains possible. Imitation marks can be carved. The system compensates through familiarity and context. Local traders know subtle proportions and stroke placements of authentic symbols. In disputes, experienced guild members examine suspect marks closely. Slight deviations reveal forgery. Legal structures recognize marks as valid identifiers. In property disputes or debt claims, a mark on a document or item serves as evidence linking goods to a person. Courts accept the mark as representation of intent, particularly when witnesses confirm its use by the individual. You notice that marks function without a central registry in many towns. Control arises through communal recognition rather than bureaucratic cataloguing. This reduces administrative burden, but requires stable participation. Merchants who leave the community for extended periods risk losing recognition, which can weaken enforcement of their symbol. Marks also aid inventory control. In warehouses, stacked goods are grouped by symbol. A glance identifies ownership. This speeds loading and reduces misallocation. The mark acts as both a legal identifier and logistical tool. You observe the carving tools used to create marks: knives, chisels, branding irons. The act of inscribing is physical and deliberate. It embeds identity into material surfaces. Unlike ink signatures that may fade, carved marks endure unless deliberately removed. The merchant mark becomes an early system of decentralized record keeping. It ties objects to persons without requiring written description. It integrates with guild oversight, market inspection, and legal validation. It spreads across surfaces throughout the town, forming a network of visual identifiers that reinforce economic memory. Another symbol is pressed into wax, sealing a shipment as you observe. The image hardens and cools. No alphabet is required. Recognition rests on repetition and community knowledge. This visual layer strengthens the town's ability to track ownership, origin, and accountability without relying on universal literacy. The mark system does not replace written ledgers, it complements them. It extends identity into the physical world of goods and buildings. It forms a stable, visible layer in the broader information structure of the town. You have just entered a chamber where written records are kept. The space is controlled. Ledgers are stored in chests or cupboards secured with locks. Access is not open to everyone. Writing exists here, but it is concentrated. The ledger itself is constructed from parchment or paper folded and bound. Pages are ruled with faint lines to guide consistent entry. Ink is prepared from soot, gall nuts, or other available compounds. Quills are trimmed carefully to maintain legible strokes. Maintenance of writing tools is continuous labor. You observe the town clerk at work. Literacy is specialized. The clerk records taxes collected, fines imposed, property transfers, and municipal expenses. Each entry follows a structured format. Names, dates, quantities, and conditions are listed in consistent order to reduce ambiguity. Language choice carries significance. Some entries appear in Latin, particularly those tied to legal formulas or broader administrative structures. Others are written in the local vernacular to increase accessibility among literate townspeople. The selection reflects both tradition and practicality. Access to the ledger is supervised. Citizens may request to see entries affecting their obligations, but they do so in the presence of the clerk or another official. The physical book does not circulate freely. This control reduces risk of alteration or damage. Margin annotations serve as updates or corrections. When payments are made or obligations adjusted, notations appear beside original entries. These additions must be clearly distinguishable to prevent confusion. Ink color or handwriting variation often signals modification. Auditing occurs periodically. Town officials review entries to ensure consistency with collected revenues and outstanding obligations. Cross-referencing with tally sticks or oral witness testimony strengthens accuracy. The ledger does not operate in isolation. It interacts with other record layers. You observe the physical storage environment. Ledgers are kept away from dampness and pests when possible. Cloth wrappings or wooden cases protect pages. Despite precautions, deterioration remains a constant risk. Ink can fade, parchment can warp. Literacy remains limited. Many townspeople cannot read the ledger directly. They depend on the clerk's reading and explanation. This grants the clerk informational authority. Misinterpretation or deliberate manipulation could influence outcomes. For this reason, multiple officials often oversee important entries. Entries are chronological but also categorized. Taxes may be grouped by district, fines by offense, expenditures by purpose. Organization improves retrieval. When disputes arise, officials locate relevant sections quickly rather than scanning entire volumes. Political implications emerge quietly. Control of record-keeping influences governance. Those who write determine phrasing. Those who interpret determine meaning. Transparency depends on integrity and communal oversight. Town assemblies sometimes require public reading of key entries to maintain trust. You observe how entries accumulate over years. The ledger becomes a longitudinal account of the town's economic life. It records patterns in revenue, shifts in property ownership, and recurring penalties. It does not merely track transactions, it documents institutional continuity. When a clerk retires or dies, transition procedures occur. A successor reviews existing volumes to familiarize himself with structure and outstanding obligations. Continuity depends on legible handwriting and consistent format. Without standardized structure, interpretation would falter. The ledger interacts with external authorities as well. Copies of certain entries may be sent to regional officials. Sealed extracts authenticate local decisions. Writing thus connects the town to broader administrative systems while retaining internal control. You remain in the chamber as another line of ink dries. The ledger is neither public nor hidden. It is controlled, structured, and maintained with care. It represents concentrated written memory within a larger network of oral material and visual systems. This written layer does not dominate the town's memory infrastructure. It supplements and stabilizes it. Those who can read and write serve as custodians of a formal archive that interacts with tally sticks, merchant marks, and communal recollection. Together, these layers allow the town to remember in durable, organized form. Standing inside a parish church where another layer of record-keeping takes shape, you realize that the space is spiritual but also administrative. The priest maintains a book that quietly tracks the structure of the town's population. You observe the baptism register. Each entry records a name, a date, and the names of parents and godparents. The act of baptism is ritual, but the recording is systematic. It establishes identity within a recognized framework. The entry ties a child to a family, to witnesses, and to a moment in time. The priest writes carefully. Ink is prepared as in civic ledgers, though materials may be more limited. Parchment or paper quality varies depending on parish wealth. The entries follow a consistent structure. Standard phrasing ensures clarity across decades. When language shifts, the format often remains stable. You notice that marriage entries form another column of demographic tracking. Names of bride and groom, sometimes their fathers, sometimes their home parishes, are recorded. Witnesses are noted. The record establishes legitimacy of union. This matters later for inheritance, property transfer, and lineage claims. Burial records form the third major category: a name, a date, sometimes cause of death, sometimes age. These entries document mortality patterns over time. They help establish whether a person is alive to claim land, pay dues, or stand as witness. Absence from the burial register can become relevant in disputes. Storage of these books is deliberate. They are often kept in parish chests secured with multiple locks. In some towns, keys are distributed among different officials to prevent unilateral access. Protection from fire and dampness is imperfect but intentional. You observe how the priest's literacy functions as parallel authority to the town clerk. Church registers may be the only consistent birth documentation available. When disputes arise about age, legitimacy, or kinship, the parish book becomes evidence. Standardization spreads gradually. As ecclesiastical authorities encourage consistent record formats, parishes begin aligning entry structure. This allows regional review if needed. It also strengthens reliability. Even if a priest changes, the book's structure persists. You see overlap between civic and religious data. A marriage recorded in the church may trigger updates in municipal tax rolls. A burial may alter property records. The systems remain distinct but intersect at critical points. Coordination depends on communication between priest and clerk. You also observe the vulnerability of this system. Ink fades, pages tear, priests vary in diligence. Some registers are meticulous, others are sparse. The reliability of the archive depends on individual commitment as well as institutional expectation. Church records also serve population memory beyond immediate administration. When families trace lineage or resolve inheritance questions, they consult these entries. The register becomes a long-term demographic archive extending beyond economic tracking. You remain still as another baptism entry is added. The priest dries the ink and closes the book. The ritual continues, but the written line remains. Over years, the register accumulates a structured map of births, marriages, and deaths. This ecclesiastical layer does not replace civic ledgers. It complements them by anchoring identity to ritual events. It provides demographic continuity that the town clerk may not track independently. Together, they reinforce legitimacy and lineage. The church register transforms spiritual ceremony into administrative memory. It binds personal life events to recorded time. It stabilizes population knowledge across generations. In a town without centralized bureaucracy, this parallel archive strengthens the broader information system. Now a small metal device rests on a table close to you. It bears a carved image, reversed so that when pressed into wax it leaves a readable impression. This object is a seal matrix. It represents authority in portable form. Seals exist at multiple levels. Individuals possess personal seals bearing symbols or initials. Guilds maintain collective seals representing membership. Municipal authorities hold official seals for town documents. Each carries a distinct visual design to prevent confusion. Wax is prepared carefully. Beeswax is common, sometimes mixed with resin for hardness. It is heated until pliable but not overheated to the point of bubbling. The wax is applied to the folded edge of a document or attached via a parchment strip. You watch as the seal matrix is pressed firmly into the soft wax. Pressure must be even, the imprint must be clear. Once cooled, the wax hardens and preserves the image. The document now carries physical authentication. Seals function as verification tools in environments where signatures alone are insufficient. A sealed charter confirms that the issuing authority approved its content. Breaking the seal indicates tampering. An intact seal signals continuity from issuance to receipt. Storage of seal matrices is controlled. They are kept in secure locations, often within chests or under supervision of designated officials. Unauthorized use would compromise trust. Because the seal represents authority, its protection is essential. You observe how sealed letters travel. Messengers carry them between towns or to regional authorities. Upon arrival, recipients examine the seal before reading. Recognition of the symbol assures authenticity even before the text is reviewed. Forgery remains a risk. Skilled craftsmen could attempt to replicate a design. The system counters this by relying on familiarity and detailed carving. Subtle features in the matrix make exact duplication difficult. Experienced officials learn to recognize genuine impressions. Seals also accompany financial records. Tax confirmations, land grants, and guild certifications may all carry wax impressions. The seal links the document to a recognized institutional body. It transforms writing into enforceable authority. You notice that some seals incorporate heraldic imagery. Others display abstract marks. The visual language must be recognizable even to those who cannot read the document itself. The impression communicates legitimacy through image. Broken seals carry consequences. If a seal arrives damaged, suspicion arises. Investigation may follow. The physical state of wax becomes part of the evidentiary chain. Authority is preserved not just in words, but in intact impressions. Seals integrate with other record systems. A ledger entry referencing a charter may include description of its seal. A guild membership certificate may bear both written record and wax impression. Redundancy strengthens enforceability. You watch closely as another document cools under a newly pressed seal. The wax hardens into a permanent mark of approval. The authority embedded in the matrix travels with the parchment. This system does not require widespread literacy. Recognition of symbols suffices. The seal conveys institutional endorsement through visual imprint. It allows authority to move beyond the physical presence of the issuing official. Seals and wax form another structural layer in how the town remembers and enforces obligations. They authenticate decisions, protect integrity of documents, and signal legitimacy across distances. In combination with oral memory, tallies, marks, and ledgers, they reinforce a multi-layer information network that functions without centralized bureaucracy. You have found yourself standing in an open space where agreements are made in full view of others. There is no parchment in hand at first. The contract exists in spoken form. Words are structured carefully. Order matters. Witnesses matter more. An agreement begins with clear identification of parties. Names are spoken aloud, sometimes including lineage or occupation to remove ambiguity. The object of the agreement is described precisely. Land boundaries are listed in fixed sequence. Quantities of grain or coin are stated in standardized units. The phrasing is deliberate to avoid variation in interpretation. Witnesses are present by design. The number varies by local custom, but multiple individuals stand within hearing distance. They are not passive. They are memory holders. Their presence distributes the agreement across several minds at once. The structure of the speech supports retention. Clauses are grouped logically. Payment terms follow obligation statements. Deadlines are tied to seasonal markers such as harvest or feast days. The sequencing aids recall. If a witness later recounts the agreement, the structure guides reconstruction. Oath-taking often reinforces seriousness. A party may swear before recognized authority or invoke religious sanction. This does not replace material enforcement. It strengthens psychological commitment and community expectation of honesty. You observe that witnesses are chosen for credibility. Guildmasters, household heads, or respected elders are preferred. Their social standing enhances reliability. If a dispute arises, their recollection carries weight. Repetition is used intentionally. Key elements may be restated before conclusion. This reinforces memory and ensures that all present understand terms clearly. Ambiguity is reduced by public articulation. Oral contracts do not exclude writing entirely. In some cases, a clerk may later summarize the agreement in a ledger. However, the spoken event remains foundational. Even with written reinforcement, the witness memory persists as parallel validation. Disputes test the system. When disagreement emerges, witnesses are consulted individually. Their recollections are compared. Convergence across multiple testimonies strengthens confidence in reconstruction. Divergence prompts further inquiry. The goal is not immediate resolution but collective clarity. Penalties for false testimony are serious. Reputation damage and legal consequences deter deliberate misstatement. Because the system depends on communal integrity, enforcement of honesty is central. You observe how agreements are embedded in recurring events. Market transactions may follow customary verbal formulas. Land transfers may occur during public assemblies where many households are present. The setting supports distribution of knowledge beyond immediate participants. Memory reinforcement occurs after the event. Parties may refer to the agreement in subsequent interactions, repeating core terms. This refreshes witness recall. Community discussion about significant transfers also spreads awareness. The oral contract system integrates with other layers. If a tally stick records debt increments, the initial obligation may have been spoken publicly. If a charter is sealed, the terms may first have been declared aloud before witnesses. Speech initiates structure that material records later anchor. You observe as another agreement concludes. There is no applause, only acknowledgement from those present. The contract now exists in multiple minds. It travels with them as they return to homes and workshops. This system relies on shared space, structured language, and distributed credibility. It does not eliminate risk, but it creates resilience through redundancy. Even without centralized paperwork, enforceable obligations persist because memory is anchored in collective presence. Oral contracts form a dynamic layer in the town's information network. They allow agreements to arise quickly and be validated socially before material reinforcement occurs. In combination with physical records and visual identifiers, they strengthen continuity and accountability. Inside the guild hall, where economic oversight is maintained, you begin to take notice of certain details. The atmosphere is orderly. Membership defines who may practice a trade within the town. Records here regulate access, standards, and discipline. A register lists members by name. Apprentices are recorded with entry dates. Masters are noted with certification status. The format is consistent to allow review over time. The register may be written, but knowledge of membership also circulates orally among guild officers. Admission procedures are structured. An apprentice's acceptance is entered into the record, often after demonstration of sponsorship by a master. The entry marks the beginning of training and signals to the community that the individual is under guild supervision. Production standards are monitored. Inspections occur periodically. Violations result in fines or corrective measures recorded in the guild book. These entries create accountability. Repeated offences accumulate documented evidence of misconduct. You observe that fines are tracked carefully. Payment dates are noted. Outstanding obligations are visible to guild leadership. This record interacts with town authorities if enforcement becomes necessary. Storage of guild records is secure. The book may be kept in a chest within the hall, sometimes with multiple keys distributed among officers. Access is restricted to masters or designated officials. Control of the record equates to control of trade legitimacy. Transfer of membership between towns involves documentation. A craftsman relocating may present proof of standing, sometimes sealed or accompanied by witness testimony. Receiving guilds rely on this documentation to evaluate eligibility. You notice how death or retirement is recorded. Membership lists are updated to reflect active practitioners. This prevents unauthorized continuation of a deceased master's mark or workshop. Guild marks connect to membership records. Only registered members may legally use specific trade symbols. Unauthorized use can result in penalties. The record reinforces exclusive rights. Political leverage emerges through documentation. Guild leadership can influence town decisions by presenting organized records demonstrating economic contribution. The ability to quantify membership and output strengthens negotiation positions. Inter-guild communication sometimes occurs. When disputes involve multiple trades, records provide reference points for jurisdiction and responsibility. Structured documentation supports coordination across economic sectors. Apprenticeship duration is recorded precisely. Completion dates determine eligibility for mastery. The register enforces waiting periods and skill verification standards. Without such records, advancement could become arbitrary. You observe how the guild integrates with civic authority. In cases of serious misconduct, guild records may be presented to town officials. Written documentation reinforces claims of repeated violation. The record also functions as historical memory. Over decades, it reveals growth or contraction in specific trades. It reflects economic shifts within the town. Leadership reviews past entries to inform decisions about admission limits or training emphasis. You watch with quiet interest as a new apprentice's name is added. The ink dries among previous entries. The act appears small, but it confers structured legitimacy. The Guild now recognizes this individual as part of its regulated system. Guild records are not broad civic archives. They are specialized economic controls. They restrict entry, enforce standards, and maintain discipline within a defined trade. They integrate with merchant marks, oral contracts, and municipal oversight. This layer strengthens the town's capacity to regulate economic activity without centralized bureaucracy. Documentation remains localized and controlled by practitioners themselves. Through structured registers and disciplined oversight, guilds contribute another durable element to how the town remembers and governs itself. You stand at the edge of a field where no printed map exists, yet everyone present knows where one holding ends and another begins. Boundaries are not abstract lines drawn on parchment. They are embedded in landscape, memory, and repeated movement. Physical markers anchor the system first. Stones are placed at corners, ditches are dug along edges, trees are designated as boundary references. These markers are chosen for durability and visibility. A large oak may serve as a long-term anchor. A carved stone may bear a mark indicating ownership or jurisdiction. Descriptions of land are structured in sequence. When a boundary is recited, it begins at a fixed point and proceeds in a consistent direction. The language may follow a clockwise pattern, naming each marker in order. This fixed sequence reduces confusion. If someone interrupts or skips a marker, others notice the break in pattern. You observe the annual boundary walk, sometimes called beating the bounds. Community members walk the perimeter of shared or contested lands. The act is not symbolic alone. It refreshes collective memory. Participants physically touch markers, note changes in terrain, and correct minor shifts. Young members attend to learn the route. The walk functions as embodied repetition. Charters may exist granting land rights, but even when written descriptions are available, they rely on physical landmarks. A document may describe land as extending from a particular stream to a known stone, then along a hedgerow to a road. Without the physical markers, the words lose precision. The written and physical layers depend on one another. You notice that natural features can shift. Streams change course, trees fall, ditches fill. When a marker disappears, community memory becomes essential. Witnesses recall the former location. Replacement markers are installed based on consensus. This process relies on redundancy of recollection. Disputes test the system. When neighboring holders disagree about a boundary, assemblies gather. Witnesses recount prior walks. Elders describe markers as they once stood. The order of landmarks is reconstructed carefully. The goal is alignment with long-standing memory rather than a quick decision. Boundary descriptions often include distinctive features such as unusual stones, bends in roads, or particular shrubs. These details increase memorability. They act as cognitive anchors in the sequence. Inheritance introduces complexity. When land passes to heirs, boundary knowledge transfers alongside property. Younger generations accompany elders during boundary walks to internalize the geography. Memory transmission is deliberate, not assumed. You observe that some towns keep written boundary descriptions within municipal ledgers. However, these texts function as reference rather than replacement for lived knowledge. If the written description is ambiguous, physical inspection and witness recall prevail. The absence of survey maps does not imply absence of structure. The system relies on fixed starting points, directional progression, physical markers, and communal reinforcement. It is stable because it is repeated regularly. Environmental change requires adaptation. Floods may alter banks, new roads may cut through fields. When change occurs, the community negotiates updated markers while referencing established sequences. Continuity depends on agreement that the sequence matters more than any single object. A group traces a ditch line with measured steps. There is no urgency, only methodical movement and occasional confirmation of familiar landmarks. The act refreshes knowledge stored in multiple minds. Land boundaries are remembered because they are walked, named, touched, and rewalked. The landscape itself becomes a ledger. It holds entries in stone and soil rather than ink. This system integrates with charters, oral contracts, and witness testimony. When disputes escalate, physical inspection reinforces recollection. The boundary layer strengthens the town's ability to maintain property structure without reliance on centralized cartography. Through repeated embodied practice and structured description, land divisions persist across generations. The town remembers where it stands by retracing where it has stood before. In the aftermath of a fire, you understand the seriousness of the situation. Timber buildings are blackened, chests are cracked open, and parchments are curled and brittle. Wood tallies are reduced to ash. The material layers of record keeping have been damaged or destroyed. The immediate consequence is uncertainty. Ledger volumes once stored in locked cupboards may be gone. Guild registers may have perished. Tally sticks held by creditors may be lost. Seals may survive if metal, but attached documents may not. The system does not collapse at once. It shifts to other layers. Oral memory becomes primary. Assemblies convene to reconstruct obligations. Witnesses recount outstanding debts, land transfers, and membership status. Reconstruction proceeds slowly, case by case. You observe how redundancy limits total loss. Debtors may still hold their half of tally sticks even if creditor halves burned. If one half survives, alignment is impossible, but notch patterns remain visible. Witness testimony supplements incomplete physical evidence. Church registers may survive if stored separately. Birth, marriage, and burial records can re-establish identity and lineage. This assists in confirming inheritance and property rights after civic archives vanish. Guild knowledge persists among masters even if the written register is lost. They know who trained under whom. They recall fines and disputes. A new register can be created using collective recollection as base data. Political opportunities emerge quietly. Loss of documentation can weaken claims. Some individuals may attempt to assert new boundaries or deny old obligations. The community counters this by emphasizing witness testimony and long-standing reputation. You notice that reconstruction requires patience. Each claim is examined, witnesses are compared, surviving fragments of parchment are consulted if legible. Replacement ledgers are begun with reconstructed entries clearly marked as post-fire restorations. Authorities may seek confirmation from external bodies. Copies of charters held by regional officials or neighboring towns provide reference points. The system extends beyond local storage, offering additional layers of backup. Material adaptation follows disaster. Storage methods may change. Records may be distributed across multiple locations to reduce future risk. Chests may be reinforced. Fire awareness may increase, though prevention remains imperfect. The destruction highlights hierarchy within records. Some data proves essential and is reconstructed first. Land ownership, tax obligations, guild membership. Other details may be allowed to fade if deemed less critical. The system prioritizes structural continuity over exhaustive restoration. You observe that authority depends not solely on parchment but on recognition. If the community acknowledges a reconstructed ledger as legitimate, its entries regain force. Legitimacy arises from agreement reinforced by witness consensus. The fire reveals the strength of layered redundancy. Memory, tallies, marks, seals, guild knowledge, and church registers intersect. No single archive defines the town's memory entirely. Loss of one layer activates others. You watch closely as new pages are prepared. A clerk writes fresh entries based on assembled testimony. Guild officers update membership lists from shared recollection. Boundary walks confirm land divisions once more. Records burn, systems reorganize. The town's capacity to remember depends not on perfect preservation, but on distributed knowledge. Because memory lives in people, in marks on goods, in physical landmarks, and in multiple books stored separately, total erasure is rare. The final layer of the system is resilience. When material archives fail, communal structure restores order gradually. The town remembers again, not because nothing was lost, but because remembering was never confined to a single place. The final entry dries beneath the weight of the seal. The chamber settles into stillness. Outside, the market square empties, but the ledger remains. Long before modern archives, entire towns depended on memory, parchment, and careful hands to hold their world together. Here in the archive, even the smallest systems shape history in quiet ways. If this kind of history brings you rest, you are welcome to return. You may remain here as the chamber grows quiet.